Welcome to the Brains Magazine podcast, a podcast with in-depth interviews and conversations with world-class entrepreneurs, expert coaches, industry leaders, and international celebrities. Get exclusive insight into the world of business, mindset, leadership, and lifestyle with your host, Mark Sefton.
I want to welcome you to the next episode of the Brains Magazine podcast. And today we have Sean Perry. Sean is a founder, he's a president, and he's the director of We R H.O.P.E. How are you today, Sean?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure to have you. And looking forward to this. I'm really interested in the work that you do. So I really kind of want to really get deep into this because I really feel like you've got a lot of value and wisdom, and I think it's very poignant. I mean, mental health anyway has been very poignant for quite some time, but I think obviously, as we approach the holidays, this time of year can be very triggering for a lot of people anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's going to be a really interesting conversation. But you agree with that? Like in terms of like this season right now that we're in, it does bring up a lot, doesn't it?
I think that it can, yes. I think it brings up a lot for a lot of people based on what their past experiences are, right? So, one of the things that we really look at, especially when posting stuff around happy holidays, so forth and so on, is being extremely mindful that all holidays are not happy for a lot of people, right? When you see these TikToks or Instagram posts of people, saying what they bought for someone, we try to be extremely mindful in the social media that we put out and suggest to other people as well. I think every year we put something out saying, just be mindful that someone who may be watching this may have absolutely nothing, may be struggling significantly during this time. And if I'm not mistaken, I think shortly after Christmas is the highest rate of divorce in the world every year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a part of that, unfortunately. I think when you've got children involved, Sean, it's very much like you're like, we're not getting divorced just before Christmas. It'll ruin the Christmas for everybody. So we'll just wait, and then January it's like, yeah, let's just do it.
Well, my wife and I are we're 23 years in to being together and 20 years in marriage. And I said to the kids, we laugh and joke about it because we talk about all kinds of things very openly. I said, well, if it hasn't happened yet, it's not happening. So we're stuck.
Yeah, I hear you. I wanted to ask you, what alternatives are there in the current mental health support system? Which are common to man, but you within We R H.O.P.E. are really bringing to people. What are the different alternatives that are out there to what majority of people may know?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we as a society have been so stuck on this. When we think about mental health issues, we've been so stuck on this hospitalization, this really hardcore clinical way of supporting. And what we have found over the last several years is that human connection, right, is the key to mental health supports, right? And it's not to say that therapists, psychiatrists, and psychologists are not valuable. They most definitely are and have their place. But what we're lacking is human connection. And that's why we created a coaching model, because what we understand is that the coaching model was typically for the wealthy, right? Of how to get your business up and going, or how to, be a savage in business. And what we realized was that in that body of work, it was helping people's anxiety and other mental health issues. And so what we're finding is, and what we utilize and what we developed here is a coaching model that's able to support individuals 5 days a week or more if necessary.
Amazing. Now, I know you do a lot with children in particular, and then I wondered what evidence that you have that helps support children in the way that We R H.O.P.E. has been supporting.
Yeah, so we have two papers written on our evidence. We use an organization or we use a company called Behavioral Health Works, or MD Logics, and we track all of our data from the time that a student comes into our program to the time that they leave. So every 30 days, we do a generalized anxiety disorder screener every 30 days. We also do a behavioral health screen at the beginning of services and at the end of services. And then when we're done within our school year, we send it off to the SEL lab, which is Dr. Karen Fortuna of Dartmouth, an associate professor, who then goes through all of our data and then gets it published. And so we're published currently. We have 2 papers published and peer reviewed, and our data suggests or states that in 60 to 90 days, we see a reduction in anxiety from anywhere from 35 to 45% in our students. It's probably one of the highest, and it's because we don't have a magic pill, right? We don't have a magic anything. What we have is consistency and support, right? So because there is consistency and support, we find that we're able to reduce general mental health struggles better than most conventional and traditional supports.
You talked about like human connection, Sean, like, and totally resonate like with that. Why is it that some people really do suck at connecting with another human being?
Oh gosh, I love this question. And I talk about this so much. Oh God. So the reason that we suck at connecting is because we were never taught how to connect. Right. Here's the thing, right? So most relationships that we see, even marriages, right, are very superficial, right? They're superficial at their value. In order for us to connect, right, we have to be willing to be vulnerable, right? And the reality is the vast majority of us, from what I've seen and what I've witnessed in my body of work and dealing with humans, is that they're not willing to be vulnerable. Right? So vulnerability is the key. However, there's a step that we need to go into, and Dr. Brene Brown talks about this also, right? Is that in order to be vulnerable, we have to learn how to work through our shame and guilt. And most of us aren't willing to do that. We struggle significantly with our past and working through those things, which allow us to be vulnerable, which then in turn allow us to truly connect. So one of the things personally I did for myself was really get over and work through that shame and guilt that I have. And man, when I did that, I felt free. Excuse me. I'm a huge open book and will tell everybody almost anything. And I think that it's allowed me to connect on a much deeper level with a lot of people, if not almost everybody I work with or associate with.
Yeah, it's very true. Vulnerability is something that I feel like it creates trust, and I feel like unless you have trust, you can't influence and you can't educate and bring a change to someone unless, and I feel like, yeah, vulnerability brings that level of trust. Now, you have a big heart for children. I'm always fascinated behind the motivations of why we do what we do on Earth, Sean, and you obviously do a lot with children. Where does that heart and motivation come from? Why are you so focused in particular on really rallying around children?
So I grew up in the 80s, and a little known song stuck with me. Whitney Houston, I believe the children are our future. My best friend Scott and I used to sing it in my room. We would record ourselves singing it. And I was a kid myself at that time. But what I realized was that those words are just so true, right? So when I got into this mental health space of helping to create change and working with kids, one of the things I realized was that our society as a whole is really lacking, right? That we are struggling as humans to be good humans in general. And the only way that changes is if we do the work with the kids. If we make sure that they have their needs met in a healthy, appropriate way and learn the skills necessary to be productive. And we have to remember that the kids of today are not the kids of yesterday. So we have to stop treating them that way. And those kids are going to be our doctors. They're going to be our lawyers. They're going to be our bank tellers. They're going to be our everything. And unless we pour into them, really pour into them, our future looks pretty bleak.
Mm. That's beautiful. Like, just I love how you've taken it from like your own kind of like reflections as a young boy through a song, and then how that's kind of then kind of given you like a mandate to really then want to pour into others because you feel responsible. Like, and I
Well,
feel like we all need to be a bit more responsible.
well, yeah, and I think also, I was one of those kids that struggled in silence for many, many years.
Mm.
I'm a survivor of suicide. I struggled with significant anxiety growing up, which caused me to be violent at times and quick to anger because of my own fears of how I believed other people perceived me. And I think the other part of the reason that I do the work that I do is I genuinely do not want a single child, if I can help it, to ever experience some of the things that I have experienced.
Mm.
Just, I look at my life as no matter what you believe in spiritually, I look at my life as being I've been blessed. And quite honestly, I don't believe that I should even be here. And so to be a person that can have some kind of power to help another child never experience what I've gone through, that's really part of the mission.
Mm. Yeah. And for whatever reason, it also comes to mind about the fact that we all have our own inner child as well. So even
Yes,
though we are now men, there's still Sean the boy in you and Mark the boy in me,
absolutely.
and that also needs a lot of focus, especially when you talked about your own struggles, like with suicide, and unfortunately, and it breaks my heart too, but I'm hearing more and more young people like suicidal. Like, I remember life being hard for me as a kid, but I
Yeah,
can't ever feel like I wanted to take my life. I wanted things to
right.
stop,
Yeah.
but things have become so bad, Sean. Like, why? And what can we do to help?
Well, the why is different for all of us, and I don't think anybody really has that answer. We can all speculate as to why, right? But what we can do, and this is so very important, is we can normalize the fact that we struggle, right? We can normalize the fact that all of us at some point in our lives have had mild suicidal ideation, have had a thought, right? You ever been driving your car and you're like, I wonder what would happen if I just took a left into that tree, right? Like the mind does some really random stuff. And if you told people that, some people might say you're crazy, right? But the reality is they had the same thought because the mind just kind of does what it does. And so one of the things that we have to do is we have to create spaces where men in particular, right? Not that, women extremely important as well, but men in particular don't have to have this bravado to say, I'm too cool for school and I don't have these feelings and emotions. We have to create spaces and places where we can talk about these things, that it's okay. I don't always like to use the words safe place, right? I think it's been used a little bit too much in our society, quite frankly. But we have to create a place, right, where people feel safe, right? Or feel confident enough to be able to share the fact that they're struggling. And when we do that, we know scientifically and through the data that people are less likely to follow through, right? That they may have those thoughts, those big emotions around not wanting to be here because life is too hard. But knowing that someone is there for you is the key, because one of the things that we know is that most people just they're feeling alone.
Mm.
They're feeling hopeless and helpless. And we as a society have to start wrapping ourselves around those individuals. And
Mm,
sometimes those individuals are in our family.
mm,
And we have, I hear a lot of times like we just didn't know. We had no idea. And and I would say there are always some warning signs. And the thing is that we're just not looking for them,
mm,
right? We're,
mm,
we're expecting men in particular to just suck it up, buttercup, and when they had a bad day, they had a bad day and they'll be fine. And so
mm,
one of the things that I've made it a point to do in my home is when I am extremely overwhelmed, I tell my wife, I am overwhelmed and I'm going to need some time. Right. And one day I'll never forget, this was in the past year, year and a half, past year, actually. We were driving and I said, hey, I've been really struggling lately and I'm just not in a good place. And I just need you to know that. And I need you to just be there. And what I need from you, like specifically, I can't tell you, but I need you to know that I'm not doing well. Um, and that was liberating that I had a space to do that.
mm,
And then I shared that with one of my boys, one of my friends.
mm,
And he said to me, Sean, I've been feeling the same way lately myself. And then we had like a 2-hour chat,
mm,
right? About just not doing well. And he's a
mm,
therapist,
mm.
and he's like, Sean, I didn't think I could tell anybody, but I'm glad that I have you. And I'm like, man, I'm glad I have you too. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
so I think it's about creating those spaces for us to be able to have these conversations, for everybody to have these conversations.
Yeah, because I find from my own experience too, Sean, like it's it's hard to speak about when you're in the middle of the struggle. I find that when people do give voice to they've struggled, it's always when they've passed like maybe some of the darker and more intricate, difficult moments of life. And once we
Right.
get to a point where we can verbalize it, it's not like we've fully dealt with it, but we've at least my reflection is that we've gone through the worst of it. But in those moments of when, like, you obviously were self-aware to know, I'm struggling, and then you have a
Mhm.
beautiful relationship with your wife where you feel safe and you feel secure in that for you to be able to share vulnerably. And we talked about that human connection there, beautiful human connection going on
Right.
between you and your wife. It's like it's really difficult when you are at your lowest to actually then verbalize at that point, isn't it?
It is. It is. And what that takes, honestly, is you talked earlier about trust, right? You mentioned trust for connection.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you came back to this because I wanted to say something about that. So trust with connection and others is extremely important, but you have to trust yourself. You have to trust yourself first,
Mm,
right? And so I've gotten to the point where I trust myself to know that I'm not doing good. And in the middle of not doing good, in that dark place, to communicate that I'm not doing good. I also trust myself enough to, or learn to trust myself enough to notice it in others that are close to me and bring up the conversation for them if they cannot.
mm,
So, I have a friend who um is struggling, and I noticed some behavior that I can just tell he may be struggling a little bit more than he's letting on. And so I'll send a text, "Hey man, what are you doing today? Want to chat?" You know what I mean? Like, "Hey, you got a minute?" I'll get him on the phone and then walk him through. Like, "Hey, how's everything going? Let me have it." Right? And again, it's about creating those spaces, but ultimately trusting yourself.
yeah. It's it's certainly very, very important. What would you say is the best way that you've personally found to improve like your mental health? Because it's an everyday thing. It's not like just a one-off. It's a lifestyle. I even talked on TikTok today about exercise. I had minor surgery 2.5 weeks ago. I haven't been able to
Mm,
exercise, and my mental health has really struggled.
right.
And to run today, even though I was still a bit sore because my stitches only came out yesterday, I
Mm,
just decided to prioritize my mental health over my physical comfort, right? And yeah, it was life giving, but I've had some really dark moments, and I know exercise for me is something that I'd really like raise the flag for. But what about
yeah.
you?
Yeah, so I think it's about I think it's about doing what you love, right? That makes you feel whole and makes you feel good. For some people, it's exercise. For me, it's definitely not exercise. I did enough exercise. I did enough exercise as a kid. I was an athlete, all the way through. And my athletic days are over. The back is achy, the knees swell. And I'm okay with that, right? I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable in my skin. But what gives me passion and purpose and makes me feel good is this this body of work that I'm in. So creating a new program, creating a new project. That's what really helps my mental health is pouring into this work. And I know it might sound cheesy, but that's the reality. Like that's what makes me feel good. Is pouring into this work and making sure that we're meeting our goals and kids are doing what they need to do to be successful. And then of course, when it's bright, sunny, and warm, I'm on the Harley. So that's also, I would say wind in my hair, but I have done,
Wind in
just
your
getting
beard.
yeah, wind in my beard, just getting on a Harley and just riding with my brothers and just really enjoying myself. That's one extracurricular activity that I love, or snowboarding. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting the creativity because if you believe in a creator, I always feel like we are an expression of who created our being, and then when we write a book, when we create a business or we create a support system like We R H.O.P.E, very much who we are, and part of our story and our journey and our DNA and our breath is within that which we've created, and then that's when we find those sweet spots, because we are supposed to multiply and to reproduce that which we were a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel as though what was given to me and passed down through my family, like what I do, is just in the DNA of our family, right? I think about my father's side of the family, even my mother's side of the family, of just helping others constantly. There's this lineage, right, within the Perry family of helping. My grandmother was well known throughout the town and of helping so many people. Everybody, most of the people that I know, well, almost everybody in my family's like in the business of serving others, right? And then my own kids, they just I don't know if it came from me or not, but they just have hearts of gold. They're all just amazing. I have 5 children, and they're all literally the most compassionate and loving and caring people, and willing to give their shirts off their back to anybody and make sure that somebody else is doing well. Yeah, I can't ask for better kids. A little plug to the kids.
Gonna say definitely came from you, Sean, not your wife or you.
Oh, and she, like, as far as she goes, she's a whole different breed of me. I thought, I'm a giver, but she's just a whole different breed of kindness that sometimes it's just too kind. It's even annoying.
That's funny. But yeah, kindness is definitely one of those things that the world needs, and I always resonate with, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. That really like rings true,
Absolutely.
doesn't it?
That's a t-shirt.
It is.
That's a t-shirt.
It's a t-shirt. Yeah. Um, for those days where you don't exercise anymore, but you take pleasure in seeing other people exercise, and you can sit there in your
Yeah.
lounger in a world where you can be anything, be kind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I had a husband and wife that I used to work for that owned a restaurant, and the wife, amazing woman, would always say, "Just be kind, just be kind," and that was kind of her mantra, right? That was kind of her thing. It's just be kind, and it was spot on. It still is spot on. Kindness, you can't put a price on kindness, and I think, like you said, I mean, we need more of it, especially with what we have going on in this world today. We need more kindness, and I think if we, it sounds cheesy again, but if we address people with kindness, the world most definitely would be a better place.
Yeah. Sean, might be a bit of a provocative question, and it's not supposed to be really, but is mental illness a choice?
Ooh, that's not provocative. The answer is no. It's not a choice. No. Right. So mental illness is something we have no control over. Our mental health is a choice, right? How we focus in on us is a choice. Mental illness, we don't wake up one day and say, hey, you know what I mean? Like, I really feel like being depressed today because I got nothing better to do with myself. And hey, I really would love to be in that crowd, but I don't feel like it because I decide I really want to be super anxious that my social anxiety is so bad that I cannot function and I can't get out of bed. Nobody
Mm,
chooses that.
mm,
Right. These are things that, in a lot of cases have happened over long periods of time, um, and have gone untreated. And
mm,
so what's a choice is getting support. What's a
mm,
choice is those around us treating us as human beings and making sure that we don't feel isolated and alone. Those things are choices, but mental
mm,
illness most definitely is not a choice. And I would also say, um, when we say mental illness, I think it has such a negative uh thought process around like what that means for people. And I don't know if there's a better word. I would like to think that there's a better terminology that we as people need to get to. And I think we've been using mental health as a whole.
mm,
But uh, illness sounds so permanent, right?
mm,
And it's not, right? With the right supports, with the right people around us, I believe, and I've seen it firsthand. The human condition is resilient, and we can
mm,
get through social anxiety, suicidal ideation, self-harm, eating disorders. We can get through all of these things.
mm,
And saying mental illness just sounds so permanent to me. And
mm,
maybe it's not supposed to be, but maybe it's not supposed to sound permanent, but to me it just sounds permanent, and it's
mm,
not. It's
mm,
just not permanent. We can
mm,
get through these things. We
mm,
can.
mm. Yeah, I ask it because I just see like society almost reflects that mental illness is a choice because there's so little regard or empathy sometimes from the fact that like you say, we don't just choose to be depressed or bipolar or um autistic or whatever.
Yeah.
Um so that's really kind of like why I was asking it that way, even knowing I could answer it myself the same way as you did. Um I think,
Well, I
like
think
go on.
I think excuse me. I think that's part of the problem, right? Is that our society is so hell bent on the past of how we think the human condition should be,
Mm,
right? It's that classic. I don't know if you guys have this over there in the UK, but the classic thing of hearing your parents or grandparents saying, "I walked to school in 10 feet of snow." Right, like,
mm,
you know what I mean? Like this thing of like, you should be as resilient as I was, and life was so bad, and da 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 da, and like, yes, those things are true. And we have grandparents that experienced World War I and World War II and Vietnam and all of these things. But what we've seen, even utilizing war as a thing, is we had men and women coming back with PTSD being told they had nothing wrong with them,
mm,
being told they needed to get over it.
mm,
And it wasn't until many, many years later, PTSD became this thing
mm,
where we have a diagnosis for it now. And then
mm,
what we're finding out is that you can have PTSD from a car accident. You can have PTSD from a bad football game if you were hit too hard in the wrong way, right? From all these things, we're starting to understand the mind more than we ever understood. And what I would also say, and I'm not sure what people know about the origins of psychology and mental health work originally, it wasn't the greatest,
mm,
right? It was all experimental. half of the people, if you look back at the work they were doing, they were butchers and had no idea what they were doing. Right.
Mm.
And so I think now we're really coming to terms with what's what going on with the human brain. And so as we're coming to terms with what's going on with the human brain, we also need to come to terms with the fact that societally we've gotten it wrong.
Mm.
And we need to start giving we need to start giving people validation for what they're feeling and experiencing, and realizing that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Sean. Sean, time has flown by. Can you believe it? It's
No, it's gone
unbelievable.
pretty quick, pretty
Gone
quick.
really quick. How do people find out more about you and your business? And you can take a minute as well to share anything else that you feel's burning, or something that you really kind of want to communicate before we wrap this up.
Yeah, so I think the best way to find out about us is to go to www.werhope.org. That's wearhope.org. It's just the letter R for R. Um, I think what I would have to say that's really burning for me is that there's a whole new way to support kids and ourselves out there that people don't know about. We Are Hope has developed a completely different kind of model. And so this model allows for all people, regardless of income, to have access to mental health supports. And that's very unusual, right? And so to give you an idea, one of our, like, we at currently at this point, we don't accept insurance. But to give you an idea, our session rate for a half an hour is $17.50 for the session. And the idea, and it's virtual. And the idea is that we can reach the masses. Most people have $17.50. And if you don't, we can definitely figure that out also. Right. Then we're
Yeah.
looking at then we're looking at something a little bit deeper that, we definitely need some support with here. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea, is that we are looking to change the way in which people gain access to supports. And we want all people to have support, because I think back to myself sitting in the playground after taking all those pills and not wanting to wake up. And I realized that it took me 20 years, Mark,
Mm.
over 20 years to share my story.
Wow.
No one in my family knew. No one. And if I could save one person from having to experience that, it's everything that we're doing is worth it.
Mm.
Right? Just one person. So I want to wish people a happy holiday. And I want people to know that regardless of how alone you may feel in this exact moment of listening to this episode, or how you may feel in a week from now, 2 weeks from now, a year from now, you're not alone. There are people out there, whether myself or others, that are always willing to help. So just hang in there. Keep searching for supports. We are there.
Mm. And in terms of children, is there kind of like an age range you're on board? And also, is it global, Sean? Working with children all over the world?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we work with kiddos normally second grade all the way through, right? We started second grade. We have worked with some first graders and some kindergartners. We're currently working on a program so that we can get the work in their hands. It's a little harder with comprehension and all of those things. That's why I think play therapy is really helpful for kids. Not something that we currently do, but we have people that do that. But yes, we have worked with people throughout the world. We worked with somebody in the UK years ago when we started early on virtually. We are opening up in Nairobi. That's one of the things that we're working on, is spreading out there physically. But yeah, we can be anywhere virtually. That was the whole purpose of when we created this organization, was to be anywhere in the world. We can find a coach that'll be up at 2 a.m. our time, and 2 o'clock in the afternoon your time if need be. Right? We can get
Yes.
somebody to be there to support you, and so that's what we're trying to do.
Amazing. Sean, it's been really good, and I love your story, love your heart, your energy. Want to wish you and your family an amazing Christmas and New Year, and looking forward just to seeing the impact that this organization that you've created is going to have on children. And yeah, just thank you for the work that you do.
Well, thank you for letting me share my story, Mark. I really appreciate it. And I hope we get a chance to speak again.
I'm sure we will.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for joining this episode with me, Mark Sefton. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Feel free to leave us a positive review on iTunes, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the next episode of the Brains Magazine podcast.